Rain presses against the palace gates like 1,000 fingers begging to be let in. It's the kind of night that makes the world feel thin, like the sky itself could tear, revealing everything we're not meant to see. The lamps lining the ancient stone walls flicker in protest against the wind, their light trembling, struggling, refusing to die. Beyond them, the palace stands solemn, massive, a darkened continent of marble and memory, silent, watching, holding its breath. Inside these walls, history is supposed to sleep, but tonight, it stirs. A shadow moves along the corridor, tall, armored, disciplined. The rhythm of boots is steady, deliberate, too controlled to belong to anything but a soldier shaped by years of command. The man is not just a guard. He is a sentinel of traditions older than his own name. His posture is rigid, carved into something more sculpture than human. His eyes track every corner with the cold precision of duty. But even steel can feel when a storm is shifting. He senses it now. The air trembling around him, something subtle, something off, an uninvited tension threading itself through the walls. He stops. The corridor stretches before him in a long sweep of red carpet and golden sconces. Portraits loom quietly, faces of monarchs long gone, their painted gazes heavy, knowing the silence is thick enough to press against the skin, and in that silence, a sound breaks. Small, fragile, human, a breath one that doesn't belong in this corner of the night. A sharp inhale quickly stifled as though someone is trying to hide the very act of hurting. Elias Royal Guard, bearer of oaths, veteran of unspoken wars, frowns behind the rigid calm of his expression. He has heard that sound before. Not here. Not in these halls reserved for ceremonial footsteps and controlled whispers. But in life, in childhood memories, in the moments when people try to bury pain instead of asking for help, he lets the silence settle again, listening, waiting, the kind of waiting only a guard knows, patient, still, but coiled like a stretched wire. It comes again, soft, trembling, a small voice cracking beneath its own weight. He turns toward the velvet curtain at the far end of the hallway, heavy, immaculate, a barrier meant to separate the private from the ceremonial. No one should be behind it. No one should be breathing behind it. But someone is. Elias's jaw tightens. His training screams at him. Maintain position. Do not break formation. Report anomalies. But his human instinct, the part of him that still remembers warmth, compassion, the world before rigid vows, leans forward. The palace holds its breath as he takes a single step. A whisper leaks through the curtain. A name, Camilla. His heartbeat stops. Not in fear, guards are forged to swallow fear, but in clarity. The kind of clarity that strikes like lightning, illuminating everything all at once. Another breath. Then, it hurts. This time the words are not stifled. They tremble raw in the air, vulnerable enough to fracture even the strongest armor. The voice is unmistakable, small, feminine, laced with fear she's trying so hard to hide. Princess Charlotte. Elias doesn't move at first. The gravity of the moment pins him in place. Every rule he has ever memorized tightens around him like a chain. Breaking formation for a noise is one thing. Breaking formation for a royal is another. Breaking formation because something inside him feels wrong. That is something no manual has ever prepared him for. The corridor flickers with golden light, shadows sliding over his armor like restless ghosts. His breath fogs slightly in the cold current drifting along the hall. The air itself seems to shift, growing heavier, as if the palace is waiting to see what he will choose. He takes another step. The world quiets. Even the rain outside seems to pause. He hears a soft rustle behind the curtain fabric dragging lightly against marble, the sound of someone shifting because they can't stay still through the pain. There is no scream, no cry, only the kind of restrained suffering reserved for children taught to be brave too young. Elias bows his head slightly, eyes narrowing. No, he murmurs beneath his breath, voice barely audible. Not like this. He walks the rest of the corridor with slow, deliberate precision, boots sinking into the carpeted silence. The portraits watch him judging, perhaps, but he doesn't stop. He stops only when he reaches the curtain. Up close, it looks heavier than he remembered. Thick with embroidery, stitched into patterns of crowns and laurels, a symbol of old power, weighing down the present moment like a burden made of thread and tradition. He lifts a hand toward the fabric. His palm hovers inches away. For a heartbeat, he hesitates. This curtain is not just cloth. It is protocol. hierarchy, the unspoken command that says, some things are not yours to touch. Another whisper seeps through the barrier. A whimper? Small, barely there, but enough. Elias closes his eyes, and everything inside him shifts. The oath he took was to protect, not to obey without soul, not to stand still while someone suffers in silence, not to pretend he is made of stone. His fingers curl into the velvet. A deep breath, a single decision, a moment that will echo far louder than the corridor can contain. He pulls. The curtain gives way with a muted gasp of fabric, folding open like a wound, revealing its truth. The golden embroidery ripples as it falls aside, spilling light into the hidden space behind it. And in that space, small, fragile, curled against the cold floor, sits Princess Charlotte, her ankle tucked beneath her, her hand clutching it like she's trying to hold the pain still. Her eyes glistening with tears, she refused to cry until the loneliness became too much. She looks up. Elias freezes. Not because she's royalty, not because protocol has shattered at his feet, but because of her expression, one made not of fear but relief. Relief that someone finally heard her. For a split second, neither of them speaks. The palace around them seems to disappear, swallowed by the gravity of this single, fragile moment, an intersection of duty and compassion, of silence finally breaking, of a guard and a child caught in the harsh glow of reality. Her lip trembles. Sure, I fell. Her voice isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It carries everything. Pain, embarrassment, loneliness, hope that he won't turn away. Elias lowers himself slightly, not fully kneeling, not breaking posture entirely, but enough to show her he is not a statue. Enough to show her she is not alone in this quiet corner of a sprawling palace where she's expected to be brave, perfect, composed. His voice softens something rare, something nearly forbidden. You're safe, Your Highness. Behind them, the curtain sways slowly, as though the palace itself is exhaling after holding its breath too long. And in that subtle motion, something else shifts, something deeper, something neither of them can fully name yet. The night has changed. The story has begun. Silence settles over the corridor like dust light, invisible but suffocating when breathed too deeply. Elias stands at the threshold of the hidden alcove, the velvet curtain he pulled aside still trembling in the air behind him. The storm outside has quieted to a dull, steady whisper, like rain reciting secrets against the stone. The dim palace lights cast elongated shadows, stretching across the floor in solemn, contemplative lines. Everything feels slowed, as though time itself is holding its breath. Princess Charlotte shifts slightly, trying to hide her wince, as though pain is an inconvenience she should apologize for. Her small fingers curl around the fabric of her ceremonial dress. It's white, laced, immaculate, but now, in this quiet pocket of secrecy, it looks too heavy for her, too formal, too stiff, too demanding of a child who sits alone on the cold marble. Elias's breath leaves him in a soft, careful exhale. The palace has always taught him silence. Silence in formation, silence in thought, silence in emotion. The first thing they strip from a royal guard is his voice. Not physically, but spiritually. Speech becomes a tool used sparingly, trimmed down until only necessity remains. But tonight, silence feels different. It isn't discipline. It isn't honor. It isn't respect. It feels oppressive, like the weight of all the unsaid things has gathered in this one narrow corridor, pressing down on both guard and princess with equal force. Charlotte lifts her eyes, her lashes wet and trembling. She doesn't cry, not really. She looks like someone standing at the edge of tears but refusing to step over it. Her restraint is too familiar to Elias. It is the same posture he has worn his entire adult life. He realizes in a sharp twist of awareness that she is learning the same lessons he did too early, too quietly. You shouldn't be alone, Elias says softly. His voice is low, controlled, more breath than sound. It drifts between them like a fragile thread, tying their worlds together just long enough to matter. Charlotte swallows, her throat tightening. I didn't want to be in the way. Elias looks at her, really looks. The tiny crease between her brows, the way her fingers twitch against her dress, the rise and fall of her breathing tight, shallow, held back. He had always been trained to look at the royal family with formality. Never sympathy. never familiarity. Tonight, the boundary blurs because she is not a symbol, not in air, not a headline waiting to happen. She is just a child afraid of causing inconvenience. The silence thickens again, heavy, stretching, folding into the corners of the hall like fabric. Elias shifts slightly, adjusting the position of his hands. It's a subtle movement, but feels enormous in the stillness. His armor hums faintly with emotion, a reminder of the structure he's bound to, the structure that tells him not to cross the invisible lines drawn by tradition. Charlotte looks at his polished breastplate, then at the shadow contours of his helmet. Her voice slips out, tentative. Does it hurt? He blinks. My armor? She nods. He pauses, caught off guard, not by the question itself, but by the innocence wrapped inside it. A question asked, not out of curiosity, but out of reflection, out of empathy, as though she sees him as someone who might understand her pain because he carries weight too. Yes, he finally says, sometimes. There is no hesitation, no attempt to soften the truth. It feels important, necessary to answer her honestly, not as a guard, but as a person. The rain taps again on the windows, louder now, as though it's listening. Charlotte lowers her gaze to her ankle. Her fingers relax their grip slightly, revealing a faint swelling, tender and warm beneath the skin. Elias instinctively shifts his weight, resisting the urge to kneel immediately. Protocol echoes in the back of his mind, its voice annoyingly crisp. You are not to initiate unnecessary physical contact with a royal. But the silence makes rules feel irrelevant. He moves anyway, slowly, deliberately, without a word. He kneels, one knee bending into the red carpet's plush surface. His armor creaks faintly, a mechanical sigh. Charlotte's eyes widen a fraction, surprised not by his movement, but by the humanity behind it. This angle offers him a closer view of her injury. Not severe, not dangerous, but painful enough to frighten a child who thinks she must never show weakness. He looks up at her gently. The floor is cold, he murmurs. She nods once, blinking hard. Are you afraid someone will be angry? He asks quietly. Her breath catches barely noticeable, but he hears it. He feels it. I was supposed to be perfect tonight, she whispers. Perfect. A word too heavy for her small frame. A word Elias knows too well, because he too was taught to be perfect, unshakable, unreadable, unwavering. His entire life has been shaped by that expectation. And now he sees the same weight settling on her shoulders like invisible armor. He softens his tone further. Perfection is silent, he says, but silence is not truth. She tilts her head, puzzled, not fully understanding the words but sensing their meaning. He continued, voice low, almost meditative. Truth lives in moments like this, the ones we're not prepared for, the ones we wish we could hide. Truth isn't perfect, Charlotte. It's honest. Something in her expression shifts barely, but deeply. A softening around the eyes, a small tremor in the lip, a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The silence between them becomes something different. Not heavy, not oppressive, not cold, soft, like a blanket laid gently over a shivering moment. She leans slightly forward, the movement automatic, almost seeking. Not for help, help is already present, but for steadiness, for presence. For someone who isn't demanding strength from her. Elias steadies her with a careful hand near her shoulder, not touching her fully, but close enough that she feels the gesture. You're not alone, he says. This time, the silence doesn't return. It retreats. A distant voice echoes somewhere far in the palace, a murmur, a footstep, a reminder that the outside world still spins. But here, in this narrow corridor tucked beneath centuries of history, time remains suspended. Charlotte exhales slowly. Her shoulders drop by a fraction. The tension in her small frame loosens. And for the first time since stumbling behind that curtain, she allows herself to exist not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a girl who simply needs a moment to breathe. The silence, once heavy, becomes a sanctuary. A place where truth can soften without fear, where a guard can be human, where a child can stop pretending she's invincible. The weight of silence has shifted, and neither of them will forget how it feels. The curtain still hangs half open, trembling like a living thing, its velvet folds slowly settling after Elias's pull. It becomes the axis of the moment, the physical line between two worlds. On one side, protocol, structure, marble, cold propriety. On the other, a hidden alcove lit only by the flicker of a faulty wall sconce and the soft, vulnerable breath of a child no one was supposed to hear tonight. Elias has ducked beneath it now, entering fully into the space he never should have crossed. As he moves, the air shifts denser, warmer, carrying the faintest scent of dust and age-old fabric that has absorbed centuries of whispers. The curtain brushes against his shoulder, heavy and reluctant, almost as if trying to pull him back. But the moment he steps in, he knows there's no going back. Charlotte watches him carefully, her small frame tucked between the seam of the wall and the edge of a ceremonial display cabinet. She seems almost hidden on purpose, like she chose this little pocket of the palace as a sanctuary not because it was comfortable, but because it was unseen. Her eyes track him with a mix of hope and uncertainty, the kind of gaze that admits she wants help but still fears she shouldn't ask. Elias lets his breath settle, grounding himself. In this tighter space, his armor feels bulkier metal scraping softly against the wall when he shifts. The sounds are magnified. Every movement resonates. The subtle clank of his pauldron, the faint friction of leather, the gentle rattle of his ceremonial sword hilt as he crouches. He notices everything. Charlotte's injured ankle is slightly elevated, the swelling more visible here under the intimate glow of the sconce. Her dress is creased where she gripped it too tightly. A single strand of hair has escaped her neat braid and rests across her cheek like a delicate brushstroke. She's trying so hard to be composed. Too hard. Elias crouches lower, his armor groaning under the motion. This time, he is fully at her level, eye to eye, human to human. No towering figure of authority, no barrier of intimidation, just a presence. "Did you fall here?" he asks quietly. Charlotte nods, her voice a thin thread. "I tripped. I didn't mean to. I didn't want anyone to see." He studies the alcove. The small space seems designed to be forgotten, an architectural afterthought. A narrow indentation between two larger corridors, draped by the ornate curtain to hide a maintenance door. Not a place for royalty, not a place for anyone to linger, but a perfect place to hide. His gaze returns to her. "You came here on purpose," he says softly. Charlotte hesitates just long enough to reveal the truth. "I didn't want to make trouble," she whispers, fingers tightening around her skirt again. "Everyone always looks so busy, and when I fell, I felt silly. Silly." The word carries the sting of 1,000 unspoken expectations. The pressure to glide, to smile, to appear weightless in a world built on ceremony, and eyes always eyes watching her every move. A faint tremble runs through her shoulder, something small but unmistakable. Elias sees it, feels it, and something inside him tightens. He had been trained to recognize distress signals in battlefield, conditions, heartbeat, breath, stance, but no one trained him for the quiet unraveling of a child's composure behind a curtain meant to hide imperfections. He draws in a slow breath and releases it with intention. His voice shifts, no longer just calm, but warm, carrying a steadiness he hopes she can anchor to. "You're not trouble," he says. "You're hurt. There's a difference." Charlotte looks up, and her eyes widen slightly as though the words strike a place she had been too afraid to acknowledge. The silence between them ripples not heavy this time, not suffocating like before, but alive, charged. Every quiet sound amplifies. The rain's rhythm outside, the faint buzz of the sconce, even Charlotte's soft inhale as she gathers the courage to speak again. "It was during rehearsal," she admits. "They were practicing the procession and I wanted to keep up. I didn't want to slow everyone down." Elias's gaze softens further. "Did anyone see you fall?" "No," she murmurs. "I got up fast, but it hurt. I tried to walk normally. I tried so hard." Her voice cracks, just slightly, but she steals it quickly. "So I came here. Because if I cried out there, they'd worry. And I don't want to be the reason the adults whisper." Whisper? The word strikes him like a blade. Adults whisper. Guards whisper. Staff whisper. The palace thrives on whispers, on stories, predictions, judgments thinly masked in protocol. And she is young enough to hear them, but old enough to understand too much. Elias feels a pull, a visceral one, deep in his chest. An instinct older than titles, older than discipline, something human and immediate. He shifts closer, careful not to overwhelm her. "May I look at your ankle?" he asks. Charlotte hesitates, then nods. His gloved hands move gently, each motion deliberate as he examines the swelling. The touch is light, respectful, meant not to cause more discomfort. Charlotte's breath catches once, but she doesn't pull away. It's not broken, he says quietly, but it is sprained. You shouldn't walk on it. Her shoulders release a breath she'd held too long, as though relief itself weighs less than expectation. Thank you, she whispers. Elias rises slightly, but not fully. His hand hovers at her side, not touching, just present. A silent reassurance. Then, a sound, a voice echoing distantly from the main corridor. Calling her name? Charlotte Flange. Elias looks toward the curtain, the only barrier between this fragile moment and the machinery of royal routine spinning on without pause or compassion. The steps grow louder, more voices now, concerned, searching. Charlotte's breath quickens, not because she fears punishment, but because she fears being seen like this vulnerable, messy, imperfect. Elias's mind races, but not in panic. In clarity, he moves the curtain aside fully now, not with the abrupt force from earlier, but with a steady, controlled sweep that pulls the fabric open like a stage unveiling its truth. The golden embroidery shimmers under the corridor lights as it folds back, no longer hiding anything. And in that simple action, he makes a choice. He will not hide her pain. He will not let her struggle unfold in secrecy. He will not pretend she must endure everything alone. Because he tore the curtain once. Now he tears it completely. Not the fabric, but the illusion that silence is safer than being seen. The voices approach. Elias straightens, positioning himself beside Charlotte, not in front of her. He isn't shielding her from judgment. He's standing with her, present, visible, unapologetic. The first figure rounds the corner, startled to find them. Charlotte stiffens, but Elias's voice is calm, deep, steady. Her Highness is injured, he announces. No shame, no hesitation, no apology. He doesn't give her pain a place to hide anymore. And in that moment, just before the adults rush to her side, Charlotte glances up at him. Her eyes say what her voice doesn't. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for pulling the curtain open. The corridor transforms the instant the others arrive. The quiet, intimate pocket of the palace where a girl whispered her pain and a guard bent the rules to hear, it expands into a pressurized space of voices, footsteps, authority, and expectation. Elias feels it first in the air. A change in temperature. A stiffening of posture around him. The way protocol slithers back into the walls like a living presence awakened. Charlotte shifts, her small hand curling around the fabric of her dress as two senior attendants approach. Their faces mirror the same expression. Concern framed by composure, discipline masking alarm. Behind them, a chamberlain moves swiftly, his footsteps sharp, precise, cutting into the carpet like the ticks of a metronome. Your Highness, one of the attendants breathes, bowing hurriedly. We've been looking everywhere. Charlotte drops her gaze, and Elias watches her expression fold into something practiced. Not deceit, something gentler, sadder. A reflex. A child trying to make herself smaller so no one worries too much. I'm sorry, she murmurs. The words fall like stones. Elias's jaw tightens. He hears the chamberlain before he sees him. Voice clipped, crisp, shaped by a lifetime of managing royal schedules with military rigidity. Her Highness is not to be unsupervised in ceremonial corridors, he says, not unkindly, but not softly either, especially not on the night before such an important procession. Then he stops short when he sees Elias. A single raised brow, a flicker of something hard to read. Guardsman? The word lands like a stamp. Impersonal, heavy, measured. Elias straightens, boots aligning, shoulders locking back into the steel line of training. His humanity folds into the armor again, habit, instinct, obligation. Sir, he acknowledges. The chamberlain's gaze drifts from Elias's armor to the open curtain. His eyes narrow slightly, not out of anger, but understanding. He knows what that curtain means, what passing through it represents, what breaking that invisible barrier could cost a man in Elias's position. You discovered her? He asks. There is an undertone, one that wonders whether Elias crossed a line or saved a life. Elias keeps his voice steady. Her Highness was injured, he reports. A sprained ankle. She sought privacy to manage the pain. The chamberlain's expression barely moves, but Elias catches the subtle tightening around his mouth. He knows the palace well enough to read the signs this man is weighing decisions with political precision. Privacy, the chamberlain repeats, at the expense of protocol. Charlotte Flange. Elias notices. Something sharp twists in him. Before the Chamberlain can continue, Elias speaks not loudly, but firmly. With respect, sir, I acted on instinct to assist a child in distress. The attendants glance at each other. The Chamberlain's gaze sharpens. Instinct, he echoes. Elias doesn't retreat. Protective instinct. The corridor stills. There is a dangerous quiet in the air, one that ripples beneath every word spoken. Elias knows what he has just done. He didn't just break protocol. He acknowledged humanness, his and theirs, in a place that has always preferred polished surfaces over honest cracks. Charlotte turns her head slightly, looking up at him not with fear, but with something like awe. No one speaks to the Chamberlain with that tone, not without consequences. The Chamberlain studies Elias for a long moment, then shifts his attention to Charlotte's ankle. Fetch a physician, he instructs one of the attendants, and prepare a carriage. Her Highness cannot walk. The attendants scatter. Charlotte tries to stand instinctively, as though she feels she must prove she is fine. Duty is written into her small movements, taught into her bones, ingrained into every anxious flick of her eyes. Elias steps forward before she wobbles. He doesn't touch her protocol, still stands like a wall, but he positions himself close enough that she knows she doesn't have to pretend. You don't need to push yourself, he says quietly. Charlotte swallows and sinks back down, relief blooming through the bravado she had tried to muster. The Chamberlain watches the exchange. His tone softens, not warm, but less sharp. Princess, you must tell us when you're hurt, he says, crouching slightly, surprising Elias. No duty is worth hiding pain. Charlotte wets her lip, voice cracking. I didn't want to be a problem. Her words hit the corridor like a sudden gust of wind. Elias feels them in his chest. The Chamberlain feels them too. Elias sees the flicker of recognition in his eyes. A brief, silent admission that this palace demands too much from those too small to understand its weight. Before the Chamberlain can respond, another figure appears. A woman, graceful, tall, dressed in deep plum silk that moves like water. A senior lady in waiting, one of the closest guardians of princess and protocol alike. Her eyes widen at the scene, and she hurries towards Charlotte. Sweetheart, there you are. She stops when she sees Charlotte's ankle. Concern takes over immediately. Oh, darling, why didn't you call for me? Charlotte's voice is small. I thought you'd be busy. The woman softens instantly, brushing a careful hand along Charlotte's cheek. I am never too busy for you. Her tenderness diffuses some of the tension in the air. But the Chamberlain isn't done. He turns back to Elias. Protocols exist for a reason, he says. Elias keeps his posture straight. They exist to protect, he replies. And that is what I did. The Chamberlain lifts his chin slightly, signaling that Elias has crossed a thin line between explanation and challenge. One of the attendants returns, breathless. The physician is on his way. The lady in waiting helps Charlotte prepare to be moved, gathering her dress, steadying her posture, whispering reassurances Elias cannot hear. But Charlotte keeps glancing at him, every few seconds, like she's afraid he'll disappear, like he's the only thread keeping her steady. The Chamberlain steps closer to Elias. So, he murmurs, you tore back the curtain. Elias meets his gaze without wavering. Yes. The Chamberlain nods once, slowly. Understand something, guardsman, he says, voice low. That curtain exists to separate the world from what it is not ready to see. Then he leans in slightly. But sometimes it is the world that must adapt. Elias feels the meaning settle between them. Heavy, multiform, dangerous. The Chamberlain straightens. Report to the Hall of Oaths after escorting Her Highness to the physician, he instructs. Your actions will be reviewed. A warning. A consequence, but not condemnation. Elias nods. Yes, sir. Charlotte extends a hand toward him, not to touch him, not breaking rules, but reaching in a silent gesture that says more than any words could. Please stay close, she says softly. Elias bows his head. I will. And as the attendants lift her carefully, as the lady in waiting shields her from the cold draft, as the physician rushes toward them from the far corridor, Elias feels it. Tonight, he didn't just break protocol. He broke a cycle, a silence. A tradition of enduring pain quietly. The curtain he opened was only the first, and the palace, ancient, rigid, marble strong, felt the tear. The chamber held a hush so delicate it felt like breath on glass. One wrong word, one wrong movement, and the whole moment might shatter. The atmosphere was no longer the rigid, polished aura of royalty and duty. It was something closer to the quiet heartbeat of a family caught in the crossfire of expectations. The kind of silence that trembles with everything unspoken. And at the center of it, Charlotte, a child wrapped in layers of legacy she never asked for. Her voice when it came was soft, softer than before. Not broken, just folded in on itself. "Camilla, it hurts," she whispered again. But this time, the words weren't strained. They were careful, like she had realized the weight they carried and wasn't entirely sure she should have shared them. The guard Thomas felt something shift inside him, a small human click, a gear that had long been rusted by formality suddenly turning again. He looked at her, really looked, the slight tremor in her hands, the glimmer of uncertainty behind her composed face, the faint line between her brows carved not by pain alone, but by the fear of disappointing someone. It struck him with full, unmoving force. She was trying to be strong in the way adults had demanded, not in the way children naturally are. She shouldn't have had to. Across the room, Camilla hovered like a storm pulling its energy inward, her expression unreadable, her shoulders tight, her breath held. Not anger, not exactly. More like someone who had trained their whole life to respond perfectly and now found that none of the old scripts fit. A queen by title, a woman by heart. And in that moment, she seemed unsure which one the child in front of her needed. The second stretched. A small, fragile choreography unfolded. Charlotte's fingers tugged at the hem of her dress. Camilla's hand twitched, half raising before retreating. Thomas's jaw tightened, the only visible anchor in a room drifting off its axis. Every eye, every ear, every unspoken law, everything waited. Charlotte's breathing hitched, barely audible. Not a sob, just the tiny, involuntary sound a child makes when she's been holding something in too long. That sound, that was the fracture. Camilla finally moved, slow, cautious, almost afraid of startling her. "Let me see," she said softly. Her voice, usually firm with ceremonial polish, now trembled with something real, something maternal, something unsure. It was the voice of someone finally stepping out from behind the mask. Charlotte hesitated, not because she didn't want help, but because she wasn't sure if she was allowed to accept it. The difference between those two things was an entire world. A world adults often forgot children lived in. Thomas felt the air shift again. The guard in him wanted to remain neutral, stone-like, silent. Yet the man beneath the uniform knew neutrality, in this moment, would be its own kind of cruelty. He knelt not an act of protocol, but one of grounding. "Your Highness," he murmured gently. "It's all right." Charlotte's eyes flicked to him, searching. He didn't smile. He didn't soften too much. He simply offered stillness, firm, steady, unwavering. Sometimes that's all a child needs, a place for their fear to land without breaking. Charlotte finally offered her arm. Camilla took it with hands that were steady only on the surface. Her fingertips traced the edge of a reddened mark. Nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, but enough to sting a young girl who had been trying too hard to pretend she was fine. "It's not your fault," Camilla whispered. Thomas wasn't sure if she was speaking to Charlotte or herself. Charlotte swallowed. Her eyes glistened not with tears, but with the rawness of vulnerability finally allowed to exist. "Everyone kept saying I should be braver," she said quietly. "That I should, not make a fuss." Her small confession floated into the stillness, heartbreakingly light. Camilla's breath wavered. Being brave doesn't mean staying silent. Thomas felt a jolt pass through him, not because of what she said, but because of what it cost her to say it. These were not rehearsed palace lines. These were words dragged from a place deeper than duty. Charlotte blinked up at her, almost startled. "It doesn't?" "No," Camilla murmured. "Bravery is telling someone when something is wrong." Charlotte processed that slowly, like someone turning a fragile object over in their mind, afraid to drop it. The guard watched the shift happen in her posture, a loosening, a barely there sigh, a release of tension she probably didn't even know she had been holding. It was soft, imperceptible to anyone who didn't know how to look. Thomas wondered how many people ever truly saw her. Not the princess, not the future figure of a nation, just the child. The muffled sounds of the palace seeped through the walls, footsteps, distant chatter, the machinery of royalty grinding on. But in this small pocket of space, something fragile and weightless hung suspended. A moment untouched by cameras, by expectations, by scripted grace. A moment that felt like a thin thread connecting three people who, by all official accounts, belonged to entirely different worlds. And yet, here they were, bound by a small injury, a whispered hurt, and the delicate courage it took to reveal it. Charlotte's voice came again, this time with a small tremor of relief. "Thank you for not being angry." Camilla inhaled sharply, too sharply. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, steadying herself. "Never for that," she said. Thomas looked down, suddenly unsure if he was witnessing something he was meant to witness. Something private. Something painfully, beautifully human. And yet, he stayed. Not as a guard. Not as a witness. But as someone who understood that fragile moments like this were their own form of royalty, truth unmasked. Even the palace, with all its rigidity and pomp, seemed to pause in respect. A fragile moment, a necessary moment. A moment that, in its quietness, carried more weight than any proclamation from a balcony. And though none of them said it out loud, they all felt it. Something had shifted. Something that couldn't be undone. Something that would echo far beyond these closed doors. The door closed behind them with a click, soft enough to be missed, but loud enough to feel like the beginning of something irreversible. A sealed chamber. A world within a world. No palace officials. No press. No protocol. Just three lives suspended in a moment that demanded honesty, not ceremony. The room itself carried history in its walls. Deep burgundy drapes, portraits whose eyes followed every movement, a fireplace crackling with embers that whispered of colder nights. But tonight the warmth wasn't in the flames. It was in the quiet courage, gathering in the air, thickening, taking shape. Camilla stood still at first. Too still. Like she was organizing an invisible script in her mind and realizing painfully, slowly, that the lines no longer fit. Her crown wasn't on her head, but its weight lingered around her shoulders in ways even she couldn't shrug off. Charlotte shifted her feet, looking smaller than she had a moment ago. The adrenaline had faded, leaving traces of fatigue beneath her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't hurt. She was simply open, exposed, in a way only children can be after they've spoken a truth they didn't know would matter so much. Thomas remained near the door, not guarding it, just existing near it. A silent assurance, a shape in the room that held steadiness like a pillar. And though he tried to appear neutral, the colors of emotion betrayed him. The tightening in his jaw, the faint crease between his brows, the breath he held when Charlotte tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with quivering fingers. For a moment, no one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that needed to be said was heavy, fragile, and sharp around the edges. Camilla's steps broke the stillness. One, then another, slow, considered. She approached the small table near the fireplace and rested her hand against it as though needing to anchor herself. Shadows danced across her face, softening her, aging her, revealing the quiet ache that royalty teaches one to hide. "When you said it hurt," she began, her voice barely more than a breath. "I didn't expect it to be the truth." Charlotte blinked, confused by the confession. "I wasn't trying to make trouble." "I know." Camilla's eyes softened but carried a tired honesty. "I've lived long enough in these walls to know the difference between dramatics and fear." Thomas looked down, the words landing heavier than she intended. Camilla turned to Charlotte fully now, stepping closer, crouching slightly, not enough to break royal posture, but enough to meet the child where she stood. "You didn't do anything wrong." Charlotte's lower lip tightened, the kind of tension a child forms when holding in something she doesn't know if she's allowed to say. So Camilla asked gently, "Who told you to stay quiet?" That question hovered like smoke. Charlotte hesitated. She glanced at the portraits, the walls, the door, as if she expected them to be listening. Then her eyes flicked to Thomas, searching once more for the reassurance she'd found earlier. He didn't speak, but his calm presence nudged her courage forward. "It wasn't one person," she whispered. "It's just what everyone expects, that I don't bother people, that I behave, that I'm strong, like the grown-ups." Camilla inhaled as though the words cut deeper than they were meant to. "My dear," she shook her head, a rare display of vulnerability. "Strength isn't silence." Charlotte swallowed hard. "But sometimes it feels like it is." A tremor moved through Camilla's fingers. A mother's instinct warred with a queen's discipline, and for once, instinct won. She brushed a hand gently across Charlotte's cheek. Thomas felt something shift in the room again. Not the explosive shift of conflict, but the quiet pivot of hearts realigning. Camilla's next words were low, honest, stripped of the ceremonial armor she usually wore. "When I came into this family," she murmured, "I thought strength meant keeping everything inside, showing no emotion, proving myself by being unshakable." Her gaze dropped for a moment, softening with memory. "I was wrong." Charlotte looked up, eyes widening slightly. "Were you scared too?" Camilla exhaled a laugh, small, unexpected, drenched in truth. "Terrified, for years." Thomas felt the weight of that admission. It wasn't meant for him, yet it resonated deeply. Royalty often looked untouchable. But here, in this sealed room, she was simply human. Charlotte's shoulders loosened. "So, being scared doesn't make me weak?" "No," Camilla's voice firmed, just enough to carry meaning without edge. "It makes you real." The fire cracked softly, punctuating the moment with its quiet applause. A pause followed, gentler now, not tenser, not painful, just space for understanding. Camilla slowly rose to her feet and took a steadying breath. "You know," she said, her voice returning with a calm strength, "most of what happens behind these palace doors never reaches the world outside. People see crowns, ceremonies, perfect postures. They rarely see moments like this." Charlotte tilted her head. "Should they?" Camilla considered this for longer than expected, and it was Thomas who felt the answer before she spoke it. "Maybe they should," she said softly. "Maybe people forget we're human too." In that instant, the guard felt an invisible thread connect all three of them again, a shared humanity that had nothing to do with hierarchy or protocol. Charlotte rubbed her arm where the pain had been a gesture no longer of hurt, but of memory. The moment felt lighter now, not because the problem had vanished, but because someone had finally seen it, and acknowledged it, and treated it as something that mattered. She looked between Camilla and Thomas, her voice timid but clear. "Is it really okay if I say something when I'm hurting?" Camilla nodded without hesitation. "It's more than okay. It's brave." Thomas felt the words settle deep in the room, embedding themselves in the walls, the air, the firelight. It wasn't just reassurance. It was permission, something Charlotte had never been explicitly given before, and something Camilla had never allowed herself. The truth hung there, simple and powerful. Courage behind closed doors doesn't roar. It whispers. It shakes. It stumbles. But it speaks. For the first time that night, Charlotte smiled. A small one, delicate, cautious, but a smile nonetheless. Camilla reached out and took her hand. Not as a queen, not as a symbol, but as someone who understood the cost of silence. Thomas remained by the door, watching quietly. Not intruding, not judging. Simply holding space for a moment that felt like the beginning of something the world wasn't meant to see but desperately needed to exist. Outside, the palace moved on with its rituals. Inside, behind closed doors, three hearts stood on the same ground. And in that space, courage took its true form, not loud or regal, but human. Dawn pressed gently against the palace windows, pale, hesitant, as though afraid to interrupt what lingered inside. The world outside stretched awake with its usual choreography of carriages, whispers, cameras waiting for their moment. But here, behind these doors, something quieter took shape. Something no headline would capture. Something too human, too delicate, to fit into the rigid mold of royal expectation. Charlotte stood near the window, watching the sky shift. The horizon moved from bruised violet to softened amber, and she followed it with the still, reflective gaze of someone far older than her years. Her small shoulders, once tight with fear, now rested in a kind of contemplation that only comes after truth has been spoken and heard. Camilla approached from behind, careful not to disturb the fragile clarity of the moment. She paused a step away, not out of distance, but respect. The kind of respect adults rarely give children because they so often forget children hold worlds inside them too. "It's morning," Charlotte said softly, her reflection faint in the glass. "Yes," Camilla replied, folding her hands gently. "It came sooner than I expected." Charlotte glanced up at her. "Does it always feel this different after something like last night?" Camilla's smile carried years, too many years, hidden behind polished surfaces. "It feels different when you finally say something you've been afraid to say." Charlotte turned back to the window, her breath fogging the glass. "I didn't know it would matter." Most truths don't show their importance until after they're spoken. A moment passed, their silhouettes side by side in the growing daylight, connected not by bloodline or protocol, but by experience, raw, unfiltered, transformative. Across the room, Thomas adjusted his gloves, more out of habit than necessity. His duty had not changed. His posture had not changed. But something deeper had a quiet shift in the way he viewed the crown he served. Not as an untouchable institution, but as a collection of human beings trying, failing, hurting, hoping. The silence that followed was not heavy, more like a soft landing after a long descent. Charlotte finally stepped away from the window and approached Thomas, her pace small but intentional. She stopped before him, chin lifted just slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady in a way that made her seem both young and impossibly strong. "For listening when I spoke." Thomas bowed his head not out of routine, but out of genuine reverence. "It was my honor, Your Highness." Charlotte looked at him for a long moment. Sometimes grown-ups don't listen. They hear, but they don't really listen. Thomas met her gaze sincerely. "Last night, you were very brave." She held that compliment for a moment, letting it settle. It didn't feel brave. It felt scary. Most bravery does. Her eyes flicked with a small glow, as though she recognized the truth in his words. Camilla approached them, her footsteps measured but warm. She rested a hand lightly on Charlotte's back, a gesture not announced, not ceremonial, simply present. "There's something I want you to remember," Camilla said softly. Charlotte turned to her fully, waiting. Camilla knelt slowly, deliberately bringing herself to the girl's height so their eyes met without the world between them. "Being strong doesn't mean carrying everything quietly," she said. "Strength is choosing when to be silent and when to speak." Charlotte nodded, but something in her expression revealed she was absorbing more than words. She was recognizing permission, acceptance, a kind of love too restrained to name out loud. Behind them, the fire crackled, as if giving its final approval. Camilla continued, her tone lower now, carrying the weight of something she had never admitted aloud. "I spent too many years thinking my voice didn't matter, that staying quiet was the only way to be accepted." She paused, breath trembling with memory. "I don't want that for you. Not ever." The air tightened with emotion, gentle, powerful, honest. Charlotte's voice trembled as she asked, "Then, what should I do when it hurts?" Camilla's eyes softened with a truth she wished someone had given her long ago. "Tell someone." She placed a hand over Charlotte's. "Tell me." A small, fragile smile formed on the girl's lips. "Okay." Thomas shifted slightly, the moment almost too intimate for a witness. Yet he remained because something in him understood that this right here was the heart of service, protecting not only bodies but vulnerabilities, the unseen, the unheard. The final threads of night slipped away, leaving the room infused with fragile morning light. Camilla stood slowly, graceful without trying, her hand lingering on Charlotte's shoulder. She faced Thomas, offering him a nod, one layered with gratitude that needed no translation. "Thank you," she said simply. "Always, ma'am," he replied. As the world outside grew louder with the machinery of monarchy beginning its daily spin, the three of them remained suspended in a rare, private understanding. A child had spoken her pain. A queen had acknowledged her own. A guard had torn down a curtain he never knew he was allowed to touch. Not for drama, not for defiance, but for truth. It was a reminder of something the palace and the world beyond its gates often forgot. Behind every crown is a human heart. Behind every tradition, a story untold. Behind every silence, a voice waiting to rise. And sometimes, the bravest thing any of us can do, royal or not, is to speak. To ask for help, to let someone in, to admit that hurting does not make us weak. It makes us real. Now, a final question for you watching. What curtain in your own life is waiting to be torn down? If this story moved you, if it made you think, reflect, feel, please like, subscribe, and share. These stories matter because they remind us that behind every title, every uniform, every face, there is a human being searching for connection, courage, and truth. Thank you for watching. Stay human, stay brave, and until next time, Guard Chrono, signing off.